Hey friends, I'm Jill and welcome back to Whispering Willow Farm. This evening I'm out in the garden and I'm finally going to be putting my hands in the soil. We've been doing a lot of work clearing out the gardens, trying to prepare for fall, and I'm officially closing in on that sweet spot on when I need to be direct sowing things. And so today that's actually what we're going to be doing. I'm going to be planting some green beans. We're going to be direct sowing some root vegetables that I'm really excited about, and I thought I'd just take you guys along for the journey. It's been so crazy around here lately. We've just been busy, still really kind of in between houses. Yesterday, Nathan and I got a big load of garden stuff. Our Greenstalks, we ended up moving over, just some decorative things out in the garden, and I've just missed being in the garden so much. And so he asked me if I wanted to come down here tonight, and he said he'd give me a helping hand, and so I'm gonna take him up on that offer. But behind me here, we've got the trellis, and you guys can see there's already some green beans on here. Jessica had planted these for me whenever she ripped out the other green beans that were here. And she really just kind of encouraged me to keep green beans on here because it created a nice little barrier from the garden and the road, which is really nice. And so these she immediately re-sowed for me after she pulled up the other ones, but some of them didn't come up, and so that's what I'm going to be doing, is actually just kind of filling in the gaps, if you will, on this trellis. Now, since we are trellising these, they will need to be pole beans, and when I went to the old house, I had a bunch of beans drying on the trellis, and I actually just grabbed a lot of them because most of my seeds are still in boxes, and they're just kind of scattered everywhere. And so when I went to the old house, I just grabbed a bunch of these seeds, and I'm literally just going to be opening them up and seeing some of these. Look at this. It kind of looks like it was kind of looks like it was burnt. Do you see that?
What are you talking about today?
Hey guys. Way to put me on the spot. I am talking about sowing beans and some other root veggies. Is what I'm talking about. So I wish I could tell you what varieties of beans these are that I am direct sowing today, but the truth is I have no idea because I sowed so many different beans at the old house last year. Beans that viewers sent me, beans that I'd saved, and really what I do is I keep this bucket right here, and every year once the beans dry on the trellis, I go and grab a handful, I throw in this bucket. It stays in our laundry room, and then I grab it the next year when I need beans to plant, and that is the honest to God truth. So I don't know what varieties these are. I'm sure when they come up I would be able to identify them, but these are just for us, so I'm not really worried about it. Usually I really am kind of more particular on trying to remember varieties, if I'm going to be selling them, but these are just for Nathan and I to put up in the freezer, hopefully eat fresh. Now a bean, a pole bean that is about anywhere from like a 50 to 65 day seed to harvest. So my estimated first frost is October 14th. So that's cutting it close. That's cutting it close. However, I don't even know the last time that our first frost actually came when it said it would. And I'm in so I was in zone 7B at the old house. I think this one falls more in line with zone 7A, which is pretty close. The frost date is still October 14th. And so, although that is cutting it close on, it could potentially freeze before these produce, or it would be like right when they were start producing. That is a risk I'm willing to take because the likelihood of it actually freezing on October 14th, man, let me start knocking on some wood over here. It could happen, but it's not likely. And since I have an abundance of bean seeds, I have a trellis that is just asking to be planted, I'm gonna take the risk. I'm gonna take the gamble, and I'm gonna go ahead and plant them anyways and just hope that we get something. I lost Nathan. Hey Nate, come here. I'm gonna ask him what he thinks the likelihood is. But if you're wanting to know, like say you're having to buy seeds, right? And you don't have anything and you're wanting to get more than just a couple handfuls and you're wanting to get, you know, a huge harvest off your beans, which you can because beans produce and produce and produce. I maybe wouldn't recommend cutting it as close as I'm cutting it right now. However, like I said, I have a lot of seeds. I have trellis just waiting to be planted. It's a risk I'm willing to take. So our estimated first frost is October 14th. And so, you know, pole beans are around a 50 to 65 day seed to harvest. So if I'm planting these today, what is today, the 24th? That's kind of cutting it a little close. But what do you actually think the likelihood is of us getting a frost on October 14th? When did we get a frost last year? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
I don't either. It was well after October.
Regardless, these beans will be good and established, and it may kill some flowers, but I bet we still get. Because even after we get our first frost, it's typically no more than 1 or 2 days of cold, and then it gets warm again. So
that is true.
I think we'll be just fine.
Yeah. So, and we've already have, you know, some big established plants already on here. That's a purple potted pole bean is what that looks like right there. All right, so I think I have enough of these beans. So the squares on my trellis are about...
You're looking at me, I thought you knew this.
No, that's why I'm asking you. How far apart are these?
Those look like 4x4s.
Okay, will you hold these for me? We're gonna tag team it. So typically, there's kind of a lot of freedom when you're planting beans, I feel like, as far as how far apart you plant them. So I plant them at the, well, let me just turn you around. It'd be easier to explain. So on a lot of things, I plant them like right here. So I'll do here and here and here, and that is kind of dependent on the variety of what we're growing. So this is about 4 inches. 2 of these is about 8. So I'm gonna go ahead and plant these 2 squares apart. So I'll plant one right here and one right here. So that'll be about 8 inches, but you can, with beans, plant them anywhere from 4 to 6 to 8 inches. There's a lot of freedom in that, which is why I really enjoy planting beans as well. It's just because you don't.
What is this?
That is a weed.
A weed.
Yeah. Look at all of these ants, you guys. They're so...
This doesn't look like a weed.
It is. It's a weed. It was in all the beds.
Some deep-rooted weeds.
So there are so many ants here, and Jessica was very honest about that. I've come over here and worked with her several times, and I knew that there were ants, but at our old farm, we just very, very seldomly had an ant problem or dealt with ants. If you guys have any tips or tricks on how to combat against the ants, this is definitely something Nathan and I are gonna have to do our research in. I was just not equipped. It is intense how crazy the ants are here. Y'all, I literally have ant bites that just end up like protruding with pus. And Nathan said he bought me some gloves when he went to the hardware store the other day, which was really sweet. So I do not actually plant my beans very deep at all. And so usually I put them about the length of my nail, because that's the type of gardener and teacher I am. Instead of giving you exact measurements, I'm like, oh, it's about a thumbnail deep. And a lot of times too, if the kids are helping me plant beans, they'll kind of plant them really deep. And what I do is after, you know, about a few days, probably like 5 or 6 days, if I don't see anything coming up, I'll just start brushing the soil back, and you can see that they've actually sprouted. They're just needing some sunlight. And so, oh, look at the pretty gloves. Okay. And so that's something you can do too, is if you plant your beans and then you notice that they're not popping up, maybe because you planted them too deep, just go brush the soil back. This is literally the first time I have ever worn gloves gardening, like in my entire 8 years of gardening.
Huh?
This seems so funny. I promise y'all, I'm not afraid to get my hands dirty. I just don't want to be bit by any more ants.
You just tell me how many you want.
So I'm just filling in all the empty space. I'm gonna do this entire trellis.
And so you're putting me to work.
You said you wanted to help. Hey, that's what I heard. You told me you wanted to help. So if you fill in this space, I'm gonna go down there and plant that entire one. And then we still have enough. We could do every single.
What are you talking about?
This long cattle panel.
Okay.
Yeah, does that sound good?
Not the entire bed.
No, just the cattle panel. Because then I'll probably plant some root vegetables on the other side of that.
Okay.
So that's something else I'm going to be doing today is direct sowing things like carrots. I'm going to be direct sowing my beets, some daikon radish, some rutabagas. I will also be direct sowing a lot of that. I can't use these gloves. I'm just going to have to get lit up by some ants, I guess. I'm also going to be direct sowing a lot of that out in the tunnel as well. But I do have a lot of things still in the tunnel growing. We've got our peppers, we've got tomatoes still, we've got ginger. We just have a lot of stuff going on in the tunnel, so I don't really want to rip that stuff out yet. So as I start ripping that stuff out, I will start direct sowing it. I will also probably be starting some stuff inside though from seed and kind of get a head start on those things. So whenever I have things like my tomatoes coming out, I will have starts that are several weeks established and I can put in there and kind of get a head start on some of that stuff. So with beans, I do just plant one bean. Usually that's what I do, and I'm pretty good. Now sometimes if I've got seeds that are multiple years old, I'll just throw a couple down there. But usually I don't really have to worry about that since I'm just saving the seeds from the prior year. And so I just put one bean seed down and it produces an entire plant, which will produce a bunch of beans. But one thing I do want to mention, especially when it comes to your root vegetables, is when you plant a carrot seed, a beet seed, a radish seed, rutabaga, these are all things that I'm going to be planting in the garden. You plant one seed and it produces one vegetable. So I'm usually always direct sowing my root crops. Now, there is the exception of beets. I have actually started my beets and transplanted them out for the last several years, and they've done okay. However, that is something that I don't really recommend as far as like starting things like your carrots or you know, rutabagas or radish and then transplanting them out. Since that is a root crop, they don't like their taproot to be disturbed and they can break off easily and get damaged. And honestly, it usually doesn't make a whole lot of sense to put in all the work and the effort of starting them to transplant them out when they just do better direct sown. So you save that entire step of, you know, having to use soil to start them, your time, your resources just to transplant them out anyway. So I've usually, you know, in the past just direct sown everything like that. The only reason that I've actually started my beets and transplanted them out was to kind of succession sow them and get a leg up. And it has worked well for me in the past. However, I'm not really in a position where I need to kind of have that head start anymore. It was I was growing that for a particular customer that we had, and so I don't think I'm going to be doing that. I'm just going to be directly sowing them out. So your vegetables like carrots are usually a 70 to 80 day seed to harvest. Your beets are around 50 to 80 days depending on your zone. Things like your radishes though, you can be harvesting radishes like 20 days after you direct sow them. And so radishes are going to be one of those things that I am continuously, when I'm pulling them up, reseeding, and I will keep doing that indefinitely through the spring, especially in the tunnel. We're going to have protection. We're also going to, on beds like this that don't have any sort of trellis on here, we'll add our 9-gauge wire and just put frost protection, row cover over it. And so our radishes will actually do really fine in here out in the winter. We shouldn't have a problem. I know at our old house we had the crazy snow this past winter, and our radishes did fine because they just store down in the soil, and it's actually really good storage. You're not really having to harvest them until you need them, and the tops will die off if they're exposed, but the actual vegetable itself still actually stays intact and tastes really good. Nathan's doing such a fine job. I'm being serious. So usually I would probably like a little like contrast, right? But since we didn't hardly have any beans earlier this year, Nathan just wanted us to try to grow as much as we could before the frost took them out. So this cattle panel is going to be, this arch will be green beans. All of that will be green beans. The other one will be green beans. So literally this entire section. And then over here is where I plan on doing most of those root crops that we just talked about. I'm going to section them off in squares, and so we'll have, you know, one, like the front half will be beets, and then we'll do another section of carrots, then we'll do another section of radish, and then another section of rutabaga. This has actually not been planted at all. Jessica didn't plant this for the spring or the summer. They just laid down that black plastic and kind of kept it covered, and so we'll be taking that off and planting a lot of this. And then what I'll probably do is fill in all these spaces too. I don't know that I'll go in and I'm not going to go through the trouble of taking this trellis off. So what I'm going to do is just plant around it. And that's one of the really fun things about root vegetables, is that you can kind of just plant in and out, you know. And so there's the gap between here and where that trellis starts where Nathan is, that I can plant a good bit of root vegetables. I could even plant some kale back behind here in this small little spot. And so I really like that. It's one of those things that if you're looking for good fillers, you can kind of throw in root vegetables pretty much anywhere in the garden that you have some free space, and it's really nice. So another thing that I want to mention, so we're, you know, coming up on the end of August here. Nowhere local has any starts, but usually the first or second week in September, I can find some really good fall starts at some local nurseries close to me, which I'm going to be doing for a lot of my mature brassicas that take a while. Obviously, I didn't get any seeds started this year. So things like Brussels sprouts, you know, that are like 120 days to maturity. I should have already started those a long time ago, and I missed my window, and I tried really hard to start a bunch of broccoli and cauliflower. However, the reality is those died over vacation, and so I am gonna have to be, you know, seeking these things out and buying them, which is okay when it comes to your broccoli, your cabbage, your cauliflower, your Brussels sprouts. Usually you can find those in a 6-pack, and they're around, you know, $3 to $4, depending on if, you know, they're organic starts or not. And so for me, that's not that bad. Granted, you know, in years past, I've just started my own. That is the more cost-effective thing to do. But if you're in a pinch or you don't have the resources to start your own, that is it is a decent deal, but something I do want to note, because I just don't know that a lot of people maybe recognize this. So when you buy, you know, a 6-pack of Brussels sprouts, that one stalk of Brussels sprouts is going to grow a lot of Brussels sprouts. But that one start of cabbage is only going to grow one head of cabbage. Same with, you know, the cauliflower. That cauliflower is going to produce one head of cauliflower. So when you buy a 6-pack, you're only buying 6 heads of cauliflower if, you know, everything goes well and you have a successful head of cauliflower. And so that is something that I always like to note to people who are buying a lot of their things and their starts. If you have the means to start them from seeds, it is certainly a lot cheaper to do so, right? Because you can buy a pack of seeds that have probably anywhere from 50 to 75 seeds in it for $3 or $4 versus buying, you know, essentially hoping you can grow 6 heads of that thing. And so that is something I like to mention too. And like I had mentioned, your root vegetables really like to be direct sown. And it honestly just makes financial sense to direct sow those, because very seldomly are you going to find, you know, radishes available as a start, or carrots or beets. But if by some chance you do find those available, and you get a 6-pack and you're spending, you know, $4 on a 6-pack for 6 beets or 6 radishes, that just doesn't make a lot of sense to do that, because that's really expensive radish when you think about what you can go to the store and buy. And same with, like, you know, your broccoli and your cauliflower and things like that. And so that's something I always try to note and tell people whenever they're wanting to start seeds. I couldn't imagine not having an abundant fall garden, right? And so I kind of miss my window. So when it comes to cabbage and broccoli and cauliflower, I am going to buy those starts, even though it would have made more sense for me to start them from seed. Since we do have the tunnel, there is some flexibility. Like, I honestly could still probably start a lot of things, and I would be pushing it a little, but I still think it's doable. And so I'm all about pushing the limits, and I have this beautiful garden, this huge garden that I need to plant. I have a huge high tunnel that I need to plant, so I am definitely going to be pushing the limits when it comes to that this year. And if all else and it doesn't work out, I started them from seeds. It cost me a lot less, and I can kind of know what my windows are for next year as well. There are quite a few flowers out here that are still blooming that I'm going to leave. Look at these. Aren't these so pretty? I'm going to turn you guys around. Look how pretty that is. So some of them are starting to die off. Some of them are really starting to die off, but some of them are just kind of getting started. So these will last. Zinnias do well until the frost. And so if that's in October, there's still a lot of them that are really just now starting to thrive. So I'm going to leave all of them. Look how pretty this is. There are bees on here all the time. I definitely have missed my flowers at the old farm. And so when we were cleaning out these beds, I knew I wanted to save some of these. Here's some little bitty marigolds. Nathan is trying to figure out the irrigation situation, especially since we have direct sowed all those beans. We'll need to make sure that they get watered in really well. Something I will note too, we're going to go in after this video and throw in a bunch of our carrot seeds and beet seeds and stuff like that. Carrot seeds are really, really small, and so what I do with those is I kind of dig a trench and I plant a whole bunch of them. And then when they pop up, I just thin them out. As far as like just putting one little seed down, I usually don't do that. And usually I have quite a bit of carrot seed. But things like carrots or lettuce, that you have those really, really tiny, tiny seeds, I'm typically always checking the forecast. I want to make sure that I'm not putting any of those on here and we have got like consecutive rain or, you know, a bad thunderstorm coming through, because what it'll do is just wash all of those seeds out, and they're so tiny. And that has happened to me before, just total rookie mistake. You know, I didn't check the forecast. I planted a ton of carrots. They all got washed away. And so that's something that I always try to make sure that we're good for a few days without any rain. If it's going to be a, you know, light shower on and off, I think that's probably fine. But just make sure that you're keeping an eye on your weather, that you're not putting out a bunch of those tiny, tiny seeds and then having the rain just kind of wash them away. Well, thanks for helping me.
Look at that beautiful yellow bird on that trellis right there.
Where? Oh, yeah, that is pretty. And it's on the lights now. So that didn't take long at all. We got a little sweaty. It's so funny. It's because you volunteered to come do this with me. Usually you don't volunteer to sweat. Did you plant this trellis too? Yeah. Okay, well that's exciting. And the garden still looks really full, which is surprising, because I thought when we went through and ripped out, you know, all the summer garden, it would just kind of look bare. Look at those blackberries.
Oh gosh.
I know. Oh gosh. Look at those things. When do blackberries quit producing?
I have no idea.
Yeah. I don't really know.
Hopefully never.
No, I meant like, you know, how usually this time of year all of our blueberries are dying out. Show me how big that is. Those are huge. That's crazy. Are they good?
Yeah.
Sweet or tart?
I've had one of both.
I don't really know. I think, okay, I either have this backwards or right. I don't know. I'm sure one of you guys will let me know. But I think it's when they're dull is when they're ready, and when they're shiny, they're still not. Does that sound right? Or is it the other way around? I don't know. One of the two. All right. We have got to get busy because kids have school tomorrow. We've got dinner to cook, and we still got quite a few garden beds to plant. Oh, you found an egg. One egg? That's awesome. All right, you guys, so this is your friendly reminder to get out in your garden and start planting your fall things. Even if you think you're late, there's a good chance you're not. Just like me, I'm technically pushing the limits when it comes to the beans, and I'm just gonna push the limits anyways. If you have any sort of greenhouse or high tunnel that you're growing in, you're definitely fine. But just be mindful, it is time to start ripping out those summer things, replanting them, direct sowing. If you've got started, that's awesome. You'll be putting them in the ground soon. But thank you guys so much for hanging out with us as we planted our first fall seeds at the new farm. So thank you guys. We'll talk to you soon.